Hello, everybody, and welcome to our world today, the Unionist perspective. We're going to be looking at a couple of topics that we believe start to highlight changes in the political landscape, but also some interesting news that we've read around the world that just show some interesting developments as humanity, and asking the question of what do these changes signify, or what do these changes highlight to us, and what do we believe is humanity potentially calling for right now? So I'm going to open it up to the team and see which one of them stood out for you first.
Yeah, well, the biggest things were that there were elections in Argentina and the Netherlands, and that we've got outsiders slash far right, contenders that got elected into power. And so we believe that it's not necessarily a coincidence that they were elected at about the same time. And so, yeah, I feel like that's our biggest story tonight, and we can go to that first. Yeah, how do you feel about these? I know, like, they had quite the drama and publicity around them, still do. So, yeah, how do you see it as people who don't necessarily experience it?
Yeah, I feel like so maybe Argentina comes to mind first for us, but for me it does. I felt like the people in Argentina have basically had kind of like the same problems for a very long time, and they've had the same political leadership for a long time too. It's kind of shifted over the years, but basically the biggest like political group in Argentina has been like under the Peronist philosophy, like after Juan Perón, who was the president like 3 or 4 times, I think. And also his wife contributed a lot, Eva Perón, and basically their ideology was a really unique blend of like socialism and nationalism and populism. So essentially claiming to be for like it was like fairly feminist, and that's changed somewhat over the years, different times, and in some ways pro marginalized groups and everything, but it was very like power to the people, and it was about like increasing the wages of workers, social benefit programs. It created state-owned industries, some of which were disbanded. And basically what it felt like was the government has been exerting a ton of influence and trying to like engineer the balance between industry and like workers. So the idea that the government essentially mediates that relationship slash controls it to some extent. And like without getting into too much detail there, basically it seems like what this has resulted in is when the government has wanted to do more social programs or stimulate industry or do this or that, because the government is like trying to pull a lot of strings, they've just been printing money. And when you print more money without the value of the economy increasing, the money is worth less. And so it's just a short-term solution that creates like problems, in the long term. And like Argentina has had like terrible inflation. And so it seems like now they've elected this guy, Javier Milei, who is like not part of that like Peronist group, basically. Like, and the old candidates were kind of just trotting out like the same message again and again, and bringing the same thing, whereas he was bringing something radically different and new. And yeah, I just feel like my feeling was, it reminds me of our last discussion when we talked about like the cycles of history and how, you know, during like every like generational period, at the end of it, there's like a crisis, which has been like, which we're in now, basically. And people often gravitate toward leaders who are really bold and different during that time, like Donald Trump in the US, or Javier Milei here, or Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, like we're seeing. And I feel like that's kind of what this is. And we'll see if it actually amounts to anything and any real changes. But the main thing too that I thought was worthy of talking about was how Javier Milei wants to dollarize the Argentinian economy. So if the Argentinian economy uses the US dollar, who controls the currency? The US central bank. So Argentina would abdicate control of its currency because they would be using the US's currency. They couldn't just like print more money, you know, it wouldn't be possible. They'd have to acquire like more US dollars or whatever. I don't know how all of the details of how that works, but it seems interesting. But I don't know if it's actually going to like solve everything. And like, you've got to, I know that, I don't know the details, but I know you have to institute like certain reforms for this all to work. Because if you're going to use like the US dollar in your economy, you can't continue to operate the same way as you used to. You'd have to like root out corruption and have like different and more like regulations. So it may not be like a quick fix, but I know some countries have done, like Ecuador uses the US dollar, I know. So I don't know if how effective this is going to be, but he seems to be like, yeah, he had this radical idea and many radical ideas, and people were happy about it because they've been suffering so long under the same like kind of leadership. And so I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, you know, in some ways, but we'll see if this may be swinging in like another direction in also too extreme of a way or something. I don't know. That's, yeah, that's what I would say for that with Argentina. And what did you guys feel about that? Or did you want to mention the other ones too? That are like,
yeah, let's focus on Argentina first, because like it's a big bite, big chunk. What I would say is that I don't think his ideas are radical, but they're just presented as such to people who actually want change. And let me explain. Like, first of all, Peron was like instated by the CIA in this kind of like era of United States in investing into, well, mitigating into like South American politics. So he was the most nationalist populist choice, basically. And it was made in an attempt to like fight the I guess the Russian power, basically, in the Cold War era. And so yeah, it was like, it was extremist in a sense, like not necessarily a dictator like over South American countries, but still kind of extremist in the populism sometimes. And it's been 21 years since Argentina has forbidden dollar into the economy in an attempt to control the rise and fall of their currency, because it is very unstable and there's been inflation for like 20 years. So very they actually have been in crisis for 20 years. So that's a lot of suffering, right? And I remember like last year they had a crisis about like people, I don't know, was it Argentina or Uruguay? Like people didn't even have water at some point. And yeah, it was complicated. And so the problem is that there is a gigantic black market that only uses dollars. Gigantic second economy, alternative economy that only uses dollars. And so my feeling is that by saying that he will dollarize the economy, Javier Milei, it's not something that was necessarily thought about in a very profound way. And that's my thinking, but more like a response to people who actually want to live freely with the power that they have been getting and the modicum of freedom that they have been getting through trading in dollars on the black market. Which means that he did not investigate into the consequences of like probably like instigating dollar might be even worse for the economy, might create not more inflation, but might devalue the economy of Argentina so much that it would like plunge it into maybe more poverty. But that's not the point. The point is to say like, hey, people have an instant gratification and solution for you. And I think that's what it's doing right now. But that may be just my, my thinking, because obviously like it's like kind of outsider, far right, nationalist. Peron was nationalist too and populist, and I don't, even if it's like he looks like a rock star, he says outrageous things like befriends Trump. It doesn't mean that it's that much different than other people, So you could even compare it to Trump promising like a wall between US and Mexico. That's the level of promise that we're having to deal with right now, in my opinion, but I might be wrong. And so, yeah, what does Granville and Isaiah think?
So that's definitely an interesting proposition when you put all of it in perspective. And the fact of it is that there are so many pieces of this puzzle, but doesn't mean that the puzzle is not complete. So even though we're not building the puzzle, we can see that those pieces actually start to form a picture, even if they aren't connected just yet. And sometimes the disconnect is that we potentially are trying to see a different picture than what is being presented. And on the surface of it, you see, as you say, a potential rock star type figure speaking to the masses on a level that they can connect with, because he's talking about his own real life behavior in one way or another. And so he draws people in because automatically they connect with him. But when it comes to his political prowess and the policy decisions that are going to support some of these potentially frivolous statements, the long-term implications are probably significantly under-researched, as you say. So I feel like on a level that definitely the people of Argentina are calling for change. The challenge is that they aren't very clear about the change that they want to see, because they are being drawn in by the charisma of somebody that speaks on their level and appears to be quite charismatic. The other challenge is when you consider that a black market that trades in dollars has been thriving for so long, and the assumption that just introducing the dollar currency as the currency of the country doesn't connect, because you're basically assuming that an entire informal sector is now going to join the formal sector to bolster the economy. And it's highly unlikely, if people have had benefit of it for so long, they are very unlikely to want to give up that benefit in support of a change in the economy. So there's politics of assumption taking place. And there's a challenge in that we're not clear. I'm not clear what is actually required in terms of the change, or what the populace is asking for in terms of the change, because we're literally going from one side of a continuum to a supposedly opposite side of a continuum. And probably what needs to happen is that for that economy to recover, for the country to recover, for the people to settle into a closer to normal way of life, they probably need to follow a much more middle route of transition.
I thought the same thing about the black market, that would be really interesting to see how that plays out. Yeah, I just wanted to add that in.
Granville, what are the benefits to people for participating in a black market? Is it just that they don't have to pay any taxes because it's all under the table, or?
Yeah, so my understanding would be, one, specifically that an informal economy is not subject to taxation, because you can't tie it up. You don't know where they're trading in goods, how they're trading in goods, who their suppliers are. There's no declaration. It could be things coming into the country smuggled. It could be sweatshop factories making knockoffs that people are buying at that currency. And then, of course, there are kingpins in those environments that have a significantly better lifestyle than some of the people that make use of that informal economy. And they're not likely to want to give up their ill-gotten gains very easily.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, because I wasn't sure, but that totally makes sense. Because then what would happen, right? Because what you're saying is, what would happen is, if the whole economy were under the dollar, everyone would be using the dollar. It would be like a stable currency. You wouldn't find that one day, like a can of soup is like 200 pesos, and the next day it's like 1,000 pesos, because the dollar's value isn't fluctuating like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what would happen is, like, people would be drawn away from the informal economy, right? Because they would be like, well, now I have a stable currency, so I don't need to participate in the informal economy as much. Is that the idea?
So I don't think that people will generally be drawn away from it. It might regulate itself, because they will probably not be as susceptible to that type of monetary abuse, because black market and counterfeit goods are obviously generally inferior quality. So in terms of a quality gain, they might migrate towards a formal economy. But there's going to be a significant component of that informal economy that's not going to change and not want to migrate. And they've also got long-standing relationships with those people, given that it's generally a quite well-established informal economy.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know then what they would do. It does feel though like it's good to like kind of root that out, because to me something feels bad about like, so your formal economy is like decaying and struggling because your currency is so unstable. And then you've got this like informal economy going, and it just doesn't, something just doesn't feel good about that. But then again, part of me is wondering, like, you've got to wonder, like, why do some people feel like Argentina has to switch to the dollar
Right.
just to get fiscal discipline?
I
Because
was, yeah.
crazy.
I was thinking the same. It's like it's never felt good how much the informal economy is just like so pregnant, because to have relationships with the world, which Argentina does, it's still very difficult, because it goes through like very corrupt way or on the current ways of kind of using dollars and like keeping some sort of like digital wallet of dollars someplace else. So it still exists, but like to the point of like dollarizing the economy, I don't know if it's like, would it be like completely dollars? Like why can it stay like pesos and just have dollars coming into the economy, right? Because like the overall round didn't work for 20 years. It's still like brought an unstable money. So I don't know, like what else is it is to lose to just like open the economy to the investment of dollars. My concern is that what if they dollarize the economy, so they're indexed on the US dollars, and things are not jumping, a can of soup's value is not jumping from 200 to like 1K. But what if like the economy of the US is so strong that the currency's value is like at 15K and nobody can afford it inside the country.
Wait.
I even thought about that. I mean, like for me, it's like it's such a worry to have. Like what, you know, like good on you. You dollarize the economy, but now you can't eat at all. It's worse than ever. And I'm
Wait.
just what?
No, but wait a minute. So wouldn't, if Argentina dollarized the economy, how would a can of soup in Argentina cost $15,000? Because wouldn't it? Because in the
No,
US,
that
like,
was not 15. I guess
well,
the equivalent of like 15K pesos.
oh, pesos. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I was like, wait a minute.
No problem.
We don't have to like take out a mortgage on a can of soup.
But
Okay.
I think that's a real concern, right? You raise a very real concern that where somebody might have a type of a reasonable existence in a peso economy, they might have a very unreasonable existence in a dollar economy. And that creates a significant problem for the population of the country that do participate in the formal economy, which also could be the very reason that the economy tanks. I mean, this equivalently, what would be the value of pesos in dollars, and how long is that sustainable, and how long does it take to recover a reasonable value to say that life has returned to normalcy? And all of those kind of things are lessons that may have been learned through things like the EU. And and yes, the pound was stronger, so probably the UK didn't feel it as much. But when you look at it from the perspective of a South American country with a much weaker currency, there are real challenges. There's real challenges around regulation and banking systems and money laundering and all of those kind of things when that shift in the economy happens from one currency to another.
Yeah, it just seems like they need to, like, the core issue isn't addressed with dollarization, because the core issue would be basically, so I guess like not a and maybe like an irresponsible investment of money, because Argentina has like gotten a ton of loans over the years, including like from the IMF, to help like bail out their economy, and it just hasn't worked. So it seems like it's not going into increasing the productive capacity of the nation, or there's some corruption going on, or just something's going on where all of that money doesn't translate into a benefit. It kind of just gets like sucked up. So I feel like that's the real issue. And then just keep printing currency to keep like bailing people and companies out. Like that is the problem. But I guess he's saying like that idea, that way of thinking is so entrenched in Argentina that it'd be better to just essentially hand over control of monetary policy to the US by using the US's currency. But again, like, I don't know if that doesn't solve the root problem there.
I feel spiritually you're hitting the true core of something there, in the sense that no economy should be that leaky. It doesn't make sense that the production is not creating value in a country so big and quote unquote developed. Like there is something that doesn't make sense, and so like obviously like we don't know what it is quite yet, and maybe it may take a few weeks, months, years to figure it out. Let's see where this goes, but the core is not healed, that's for sure. And Granville was right, like they're okay, like they want to make a new choice, we're making a new choice, we're suffering, but like for now, like the spiritual follow-up is not quite yet there. But hey, we may get to it. Like you know, people are not making a choice of utter chaos, and you can't come back for the former value when you're hitting the new value of dollarizing the economy. So it may not go so far as to do that. Maybe not. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see what the choice is and how it goes, and yeah. But I want to talk about the Netherlands too, because it's speaking to like
add one thing, and I think it's a little bit anecdotal, but like, part of it feels a bit like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. And so, like, fire has the potential to destroy or remake after a period. So, while we may not understand the spiritual core of the choice just yet, the burn could lead to new growth.
right. And that was what I wanted to hit with the Netherlands too. Like the fact that it's getting so chaotic worldwide, and that we're actually seeing this far right outsider groups taking power in more and more countries, whereas it was just like a slight fear a few years ago. Like, are we witnessing the extremism of choice that comes with like the spiritual like polarization of the planet right now? Like there is like, taking sides between what is actually like good and freedom, and taking sides with what is actually like delusion and maybe trial through fire or like something. But yeah, it's not to bring an apocalyptic subject right now. I don't think that's the territory or like the goal of the discussion, but the energy behind these two elections feels quite new. Not new necessarily in the positive sense, but it's like it feels like there's something that changed, compared to the choices that we made a few years ago. So yeah, I want to go probably deeper into that, know how you feel about it, but basically the Netherlands, yeah, we have a leader on our hands in the Netherlands. I would say the funniest thing is that he wants all people that are immigrants outside the country, but the Queen is from Buenos Aires and her grandparents are from, well, the Queen is from Argentina and her grandparents are from Italy and Spain. So immigrants of immigrants of immigrants. And he himself, I don't remember his exact name, I'm sorry, but he himself is like third generation Indonesian or something.
Geert Wilders?
He is third generation Indonesian, yeah.
Oh.
But I find it funny in France that happens too, like someone that is Arabic but very integrated into the country would be the most far right political candidate at this time, or like Sarkozy in 2005. I mean, he's half Polish, or like his grandparents were Polish. So it's like, I think while some people may actually believe in the purity of a nation and the supremacy of a certain ethnic group, I think what people are actually searching for is way deeper than that, even though it's masking a lot of like xenophobia or racism. I think they're actually searching for stability, and I think they're projecting the instability on a certain group of people that doesn't necessarily look like them or act like them or has the same traditions as them. But again, that's delusion. That's extreme delusion. And the fact that the problem is outside of yourself. So yeah, I just want to say that we've come a long way from like Black Lives Matter, when we were just like, hey, I don't even understand why people do these things. Like, it's not even logical to try to reject someone that is from another color. But like, seeing that the problem is over than what is actually presented to the people, I think that's the most important thing. So we need to differentiate like this influencer type of like political campaign that people are kind of doing right now and what is at the core. And yeah, I just want to know what you guys feel about that.
I think the one thing that kind of stands out for me as you were talking and just feeling into it, like, when we go into the core of these political leaders' heritage and the heritage of some very prominent figures in their countries and things like that. And it kind of it starts to feel like there's still a self-acceptance wound that almost is being played out in the projection of weakness onto other ethnicities. And so if we were to reflect that back, there's kind of this almost dissatisfaction with the core of at the core, like there's no real acceptance. There's no forward movement when the pain is permanently projected onto other race groups or class groups or whatever that flavor of the week, month, or day or year is. It kind of just feels like there's a lot of animosity, but for me, it feels very much personal and that's why we find that the projections are so extreme.
Mhm. Yeah, it just seems like this is kind of like, yeah, it's just something that we've talked about before, where sometimes people feel uncomfortable with change because their identity is linked to a certain image of society. Like, so with the Netherlands, it would be like, what does it mean to be Dutch? Is it like you have to be of the Dutch ethnicity and agree to certain like cultural practices and norms? Or is it something else, something like bigger than that? Or what is it? Is it just like a statehood? Like, is it just like you're a citizen of the country, and then it's like a multicultural country, and people, being afraid of cultural change is the essence of that, basically, that they're just like, they feel like their existence is being threatened because they're identifying with, culture as they grew up with, basically. But, it's just like, cultural change is natural. Every single culture, we have to remember, every single culture was influenced by tons of different groups of people throughout history. And you have to remember that through the ages, like, different cultural groups have left some impact, left less impact, and have waxed and waned. And it's been that way forever. Like, and at some point in continental Europe, the Celtic people, as in like related to the people of Ireland and Scotland and Wales, like the Celtic people were the biggest group in continental Europe. And then their cultures basically like disappeared largely. And they didn't really leave a huge linguistic cultural impact, although they did leave some, and it's just like, what's the big deal? Like, nobody's sad today about that, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that like we should or shouldn't like do anything in particular in terms of like maintaining culture. There's just like, everybody has a choice over like what they want in their lives, and one shouldn't impose that on others, and to me, I don't know, what do you guys feel like? How do you speak to and address the cultural fears they're coming up? Because what they're saying is they're like, no school should teach any language other than Dutch. There should be instruction should all be in Dutch.
Mhm.
There can't be any more mosques or Islamic schools. That he had the proposal to ban the Quran, which probably won't happen, because remember, like, they have to form a coalition to govern, and other parties don't agree with that, so that's probably not going to happen. But like, what is this all about, and like, what is the help?
Well, as a European country, it's doubly dumb, I would say. Firstly, it's dumb because, well, the Netherlands has a ton of islands all around the world. I think the Kingdom of Holland is way bigger than the Netherlands, Holland and Netherlands in itself. So they have like different citizenship and things and structure and administration for everyone, but still, like, it doesn't really make sense to try to separate something that is inseparable, except if you want to actually make different states, which is not the case right now. It's dumb, secondly, because like language is a moving thing, and we have the same thing in France, where like people on their high horse are like, oh my God, French is dying, and people are including Creole and Arab in it, and English, and we must protect our language. And linguists actually made a pamphlet, like a book of saying like, hey, fuck off. Like, French is fine. French is fine, and that's how language actually works. And I think like there's something deep and wise that we have as unionists, and you may agree with me or like add to it if you want, but I've been in like abusive, low-key or high-key abusive relationships before. And it's hard, and you experience hard things, like it's not easy. But as much as you want to blame the other people for it, I think actually staying inside the relationship and actually staying inside this blame pattern of relationship makes it so that you can't escape the identity that is created for you in that abusive pattern or relationship. And you actually create that all on your own, as super hard as it is to admit. That's you that create this staying into the identity and relationship if you decide to stay into the pattern of blame. So you end up with results of your choices, which is not like abuse, but it's like actually like not making anything about it, because like it's hard. It's life is like hard. Like we gotta master it. We gotta get into the game. Gotta move on. And that's the whole problem of their identity that you both were mentioning. Like, in order to create a new identity for yourself, you have to accept that you are the person that is going to change the situation. That doesn't mean that you're the core problem of why your soul or country is like perishing, but nobody is gonna make that change for you. So again, like it's blaming and projecting, and so in blaming and projecting, we put our power into someone that probably doesn't have the power to even change it, as much as you may like flail and go around and scream on the outside, because we know this, like as unionists, like we've tried different things from the outside, like, oh, this doesn't work, so we'll try something else on the outside, and we'll try something else on the outside, and we'll try something else and we keep trying until we realize that, okay, maybe I actually gotta, do some self-introspection here before actually trying something else on the outside, because it doesn't work. And so I think that, again, in electing someone that is kind of an outsider and an extremist, again, humanity is not making that different of a choice as they think they are, because we're not choosing to change on the inside. The core is not healed yet. So yeah, that's just, hard truth, hard pill to swallow.
And I think you've spoken to the very core of it, because the fact of the matter is, for as long as there is an opportunity to assign blame, there's an opportunity not to take responsibility for living up to your own potential. So, and I think that's where the challenge sits, is that there's the secondary gain of projection, but the primary requirement is that you take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror and you go, self, what the hell are you doing? It's just as simple as that. And the perspective that we have from unionists from a unionist perspective, is fortunate, because we have gone through the cycles of healing and learning, and we continue to evolve. And the challenge with a lot of people that still look to the outside for any type of validation in terms of their identity or their nationality or their power or their health or anything like that, is that the outside does not ever really give it to you. And so what remains is people stuck in a cycle of feeling like nothing can change. And so they do make these extreme choices because this didn't work, so let me do that. But that's also not going to work because it's also on the outside of you. And so this is the extreme that they are toggling, that we are able to identify because we've stopped toggling it.
Mhm.
We've started to go to the core that doesn't need to be toggled.
Yeah, it's basically control. Like it's basically, yeah, it's control. Like it's saying like, our society is becoming more multicultural, and our society and culture and language and other things are being influenced by other societies, cultures, and languages, and these influences happening. So it's saying, let's capture a certain period of our culture and our idea of what it is and what it is not, and let's like ossify that. Let's set that in stone. Never gonna happen. It's absolutely never gonna happen. And it never has, you know. And I think in Europe, like the birth rates are a lot lower depending on what country. Because usually, right, when people's standard of living goes up, usually birth rates go down. And the Western world is all dealing with that. And, you know, a lot of countries, like some countries more than others, rely on immigration to, you know, keep their workforce up and everything like that, and keep their productive capacity up and keep their society running. And some countries resist that really hard and some don't. And it's just like, but it's kind of like, what, there's no problem with that, you know? And all we need to do is know that like everyone's a sovereign being. Like if you want to have a certain culture or language, no one's going to take that away from you. Nobody can. And if someone else, you know, if culture or language is changing and other people are doing different things, like that literally does not affect you. You know, like it's just not, do you know what I mean? It's just not a problem. But people see it as that, and it's like you're saying, like you guys were saying, like it's seeking something outside of yourself, like, I don't know, identity, belonging, safety, whatever, outside of yourself. And it's just like, no, you don't need that, you know.
To throw some stats into it, like by 2030, Western countries are expected to actually need massive immigration of all kinds to be able to survive in certain parts of the economy. It was actually already the case before, but it slowed down and that's where like far-right groups seized the opportunity to say that people from the 60s and 70s, like, and their generation afterwards shouldn't be here anymore, like it's not their country. Even though like they've built parts of it, but it's expected to speed back up. And by 2050, most Western countries will not have an ethnic majority groups. So even in the United States, like we may have like small groups that are equal parts. It's like basically equal part, like Black and white and Asian and Arab and things like that, demographically. And everyone, in terms of like basic science, like that's what education actually teaches people. And that's what people don't want to teach anymore in the US or in the Netherlands. That's so dumb. It's like Peronist movement tries to control the economy and shut it down from the world while still having a relationship from the world, control. Tries to have dollar as their currency, control. Tries to make immigrants live from one country, control. Like, and and people, it's like there is the delusion because people actually think that they're making different choices, but at the core, it's still the same. And that kind of pains me more than any kind of like nationalist communication that any far-right leader could ever make, because people are just falling for yet another delusion from people that are actually not that outsider as they think. Most of them are like rich, bourgeois, established people that just presents as people that have never touched a finger inside politics, which is not true. So yeah, doing your research, making decisions out of peace and not desperation, again, super important. And yeah, seeing others as human, again, like it's not just Israel and Hamas, like the cruelty that we blame other people for, like we do have it too when we see people inside our own countries as others, of a political party, and we don't want to have a discussion, we don't want to have equal parts of the same government. Like it's all the same, and people don't even realize that, and it's actually quite sad.
Yeah, did you want to transition to the Israel-Hamas thing, or did you guys want to talk about Congo?
I wasn't, yeah. I
Because
was thinking.
Yeah, it seemed to transition.
Isaiah, did you want to say something?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have like 8 minutes left, so probably just Congo, I think, deserves a bit more time to dive into it. So maybe a little bit of a checkpoint on like Israel and Hamas conflict. So from the latest news, like we're still in a truce, because there is like a whole debacle of like political show of freeing of hostages. Well, political show for Hamas, but like actual like freeing of hostages for the rest of people, which is like quite a relief. And yeah, like it's a weird situation. What do you guys feel like in your hearts? Like I don't know how to decrypt the situation, like how to unravel it, but yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It feels like it requires decryption, which in and of itself just tells you that it's seriously convoluted, because generally things make sense in some form or another, or multiple facets coming together to make sense in some form or another. There's just, for me, it's literally starting to feel like a very nonsensical conflict, but based on quite a bit of extremism on both sides. It's literally like, I mean, when Qatar is the person mediating the conflict, there's something happening, right? And and this is the thing, like this game of chess or drafts or whatever it is doesn't have the normal pieces on the board, and the pieces on the board don't move in the ways we've come to expect or even sense of them moving. So it's sowing a little bit of confusion in the world, but confusion often hides the core of truths. that aren't yet visible. And that is what my concern is that we actually don't know what we don't know, but we do know that there is another game afoot.
And that's the thing with Israel and Palestine, right? Like, we never know what actually is going on. That's the thing that's been going on for years. Like, why is there so much confusion? Why are people like literally like screaming at each other like, no, it's Palestine, no, it's Israel, and not actually arriving to a conclusion after 100 years. Like, what's the deal? And yeah, it's very, 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 very confusing. And I think the fact that this truth and freeing of hostages and this war and conflict is just feels nonsensical and calls for a ceasefire and is confusing. I think it's just like the tip of the iceberg of like what we don't understand. So yeah, no answer is there for now, I feel.
And here's the other thing. The other thing is, and you know, it's just a thought, and it might be an insight or not. We can see how this plays out. But often, the people that fight the most end up loving each other the most as well. Bizarrely, people move in those types of extremes. So, you know, there's something else that's a caveat here that says, what is the core of it? Are they so similar that they're fighting to remain dissimilar? Or are they so dissimilar that they cannot connect? And I think it's more the case of the first instance.
Yeah. Sacred land, sacred space, sacred wall, sacred rules and tradition and religion. And
yeah, it might just
protection.
be a case of opposites do not attract in this instance. It might be like for like attracts in this instance.
I mean, yeah, I feel like for like the past month, we've been talking about how everyone is human and it's important to know the actually like it's like discovering that you have values in common with people in the deep south of like a deep country of Texas. It's like uncanny and like you don't really like what, but like you realize that behind all the bullshit and the ethnic differences, maybe you may have the same values, but yeah, you actually have to have a discussion with people to see that. So again, like misunderstandings and humanity, I think, is at the core of this discussion. So I just want to have the last words.
Oh, yeah, I feel like it just feels peaceful and compassionate to have a ceasefire and maybe to pursue like diplomatic solutions and also to free hostages, because like hostage taking, I'm very confident in saying it's never a divine thing to do, like ever. And yeah, I'm glad that that's happening. And yeah, I guess it does have to do with respecting that something can be sacred sites or have different meanings for different people and that they can coexist, and you have to work through conflicts peacefully without resorting to violence, unless someone is like actively coming at you trying to destroy you, like Russia to Ukraine, obviously trying to do that. But yeah, so that's what I feel from it. We can go into so many details with that, but our time is up and more will be revealed in the coming weeks. So, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody, for the conversation. Thank you to everybody that's been following us. Also, please feel free to like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel. And we look forward to seeing all of you again next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.